Welcome to Spinning Back Clique, where each week here at MMA Junkie, we take a quick spin through the biggest stories in MMA. And on today's episode, Noche UFC is in the books, and we're here to unpack the historic card. Merab Dvalishvili and Valentina Shevchenko walk away with the belts on Saturday night. However, neither fight was labeled a barn burner, and UFC 309 is slowly filling up. We have some big news to share regarding that card. However, Tom Masvidal and Conor McGregor, your services will not be needed. Hello, everyone. Gorgeous George here on the con, and look at the distinguished panel we have for you today. Danny Segura, the host of Hablemos MMA, a Spanish-speaking MMA show, outstanding reporter out in Miami. Farah Hanoun checks in from overseas. She's our international superstar reporter. And Mike Bond, one of the best in the business. He is an MMA media titan. Kamikaze will be on the ones and twos today. Let's get going, guys. Noche UFC is in the books, and I'm sure it looked pretty cool on my TV because these eyes witnessed it. And Joe Rogan, who was inside the Sphere, says every UFC should be at the Sphere going forward. What did you guys think? However, react. Fada, you go first. You still buzzing?
Yeah, I mean, listen, the fights were awesome up until probably the co-main and main event. I understand they were a little bit slower, but the Sphere, the graphics, everything about it was a lot of fun. It was very cool. It kept my eyes peeled. Now, don't forget, my side of the world, we're watching it in the middle of the night, so obviously, it's always hard to stay awake for these pay-per-views, but I had my eyes peeled. I was interested to see the movies in between. The show was really cool. I know a lot of people were mocking. I don't know what they were expecting, but for me, I think it lived up to the expectations. It was a lot of fun. The fights were awesome. We had some fight of the year contenders, a couple of them. And then main and co-main maybe didn't deliver the way fans expected it to, but we'll dive into those fights later on in terms of each fighter's strategy. But overall, I thought the night of fights were fun. I thought it was really cool. I thought the UFC executed well, and I think they should be very proud of the end result. I enjoyed it.
All right, Danny Segura, what were your thoughts on the historic event?
I thought it was sick in terms of like the Sphere. The whole show was amazing. The fights, I think we expected a little bit more, especially for the main and co-main event. But outside of that, I thought it was a spectacular show. Kudos to the UFC for trying something new. I mean, they're a pioneer in this. We talk about how, things are changing for the consumers due to technology and all that. Well, sporting events are changing too. And I think this is the beginning of maybe more in the future and just like the way we consume sports. I think this is part of it. This is part of the evolution. So I thought it was great. I can't believe there's some people online criticizing it, but I thought it was dope. I think it's one of the coolest events I've ever seen, and I wasn't even there in person. I'm sure the experience of being there must have been brutal. So I'm all in for it. I thought it was pretty sick. UFC at the Sphere. Hopefully there's more of those down the line.
That sounds like a message to Scott Wade in the chat. He wasn't really overwhelmed. Mike Bond, you've been to stadium shows and you've been to big shows all over the world. All right, but how did you compare this one to that one?
Yeah, so I wasn't there obviously, but I enjoyed the experience watching at home like quite a bit, honestly. It started a little slow in terms of, all the spectacle side of it. You could tell early on they were having a little bit of audio issues, some issues with the camera shots and things like that, but that smoothed out within a couple fights. And by the time we got to the main card and, the movie, as they put it, really started to come with those clips and the stories and stuff. It was all really spectacular. It wasn't overbearing. I think the movie length, Farah and I talked about this a little bit on the preview show, like 90 seconds was perfect. I think if these went 3, 4, 5 minutes, it would have been pretty dragged on. I mean, the card was pretty long as it was with all the stuff that happened there. I don't recall many times where the main event ended at nearly 2 a.m. Eastern time. So that was a long night in that regard. But yeah, I mean, I've said it pretty much since this was announced. Anytime the UFC tries something different and unique, outside of the norm. You mentioned those stadium shows I've been to, George. Sometimes if you're watching at home, you can't even tell if there's 40,000 people in a stadium compared to 16,000 in an arena stateside or something. So this felt different. It was unique. It was special. And I really enjoyed it. And I think Danny Segura might have had one of the best tweets of the night saying this is as close to real life Mortal Kombat as you're going to get. And that just really stuck with me because those backdrops of the fight were sick.
It was, man. I was really blown away. And then the stories, 90 seconds. You guys are right. Perfect length. I liked it. Mike, I want to stay with you, though. This was a success. I mean, it did well at the gate. Overwhelmingly, I know, like I said, a few people maybe weren't overwhelmed, but for the most part, a lot of people really, really enjoyed it. Those that were there in person were blown away. Will we see it again? What are your thoughts? Just knowing how Dana White has changed his mind before.
Yeah, deep in my gut, I do think we'll see one again. I don't know if it's going to be in 6 months or in 6 years, but I do think they'll go back in there. There'll probably be another opportunity with this contract they have with MGM, either to get out of it, as Dana White kind of alluded to at the post-fight press conference. There could be a new arena being built in Las Vegas in the coming years. You probably know more of that than I do, George, what could be in the works, but it seems like maybe they're thinking outside the box of Las Vegas venues besides this T-Mobile arena deal that they've been in for several years now. So I think it's definitely possible in the future. I don't think it's going to be a routine occurrence, just given the financial impact needed. Like I think we had talked a little bit about before, could maybe a second visit back be more or less expensive, just knowing that, like, them knowing what they have to do, being able to budget things a little bit better. But if you're doing a different show, a different theme, you're going to have to rebuild all these graphic things from scratch. And that's what I assume is the most expensive part. So I don't really see ways to make this incredibly cheaper moving forward. So I do think it's going to be a special, rare thing. And yeah, I mean, it was a success in all fronts. I'd be curious to know how someone who bought tickets, like when they went right on sale at the beginning and paid maximum prices without things being chopped down, how they felt about it, and whether they felt it was worth their money. That would be kind of the only thing. But sitting at home, just being the price of any other UFC pay-per-view, I don't see how you could be overly disappointed, maybe besides the final 2 fights, which we'll get into.
Yeah, and what Mike's talking about is there are rumors of an NBA team coming to Las Vegas. It would be a little bit south of the Strip, so kind of like on the Mandalay Bay side, not the Stratosphere side, if that makes sense to anybody. It'd be even further south of that, and of course, it'll be state of the art. So who knows if that's what he was alluding to. I just hope that maybe like the BMF. I think we had the BMF, and then 4 years later we had it again. I don't think I want to wait 4 years, maybe 2 years. I'd really love for them to go back. Hopefully they can bridge something with MGM. Hey, look, we'll promote your businesses on one of the fucking stories or something. But we got to do it again, man. It was dope. Only for selfish reasons, is I want to go to that one. So I don't know. One of you two will have to, or one of you three, or all three of you will have to host the next watch along, because I really want to be at the next one. Those guys, especially Rogan and Cormier, sold it to me. But let's talk about the fights. Fada, your reaction to Dvalishvili beating O'Malley. Like, we have a new world champion. It's in the history books. It's the most exciting division, I believe, in all of MMA. But we're all just kind of like, congrats, Merab. We're, no big deal. Like, we're all just kind of moving about our business. But what was your reaction to the fight and Merab's performance?
May have lost her.
Let's
George.
go to Danny Segura right now while we get Fada back. Go ahead, Danny.
I think she's back. I don't know.
Oh,
if
she's back. Okay, Fada, did you hear me, or you want to go on talk about Merab's performance?
Sure. Yeah, I can go now. Apologies for that. Yeah. I think both guys were very tentative. I think Merab did what Merab does, but he was a little more tentative than I expected him to. But then when you see O'Malley hurt him in round 5, you understand why. He knew how he knows how dangerous Sean O'Malley can be. He saw what he did to his best friend Aljamain Sterling. So I think the tentativeness from Merab's side is understandable. I just expected him to ramp up the aggression a little bit more. Like when I look at that performance and the game plan and the blueprint that you expect him to go through, you think of Bilal and Leon Edwards. Well, Bilal was kind of like walking through the fire. I expected Merab to try and walk through the fire a little bit more. He was kind of circling around a little bit more than I would have wanted him to. But then again, I referred to that round 5 body kick that had him hurt. So you kind of understand why he was being the way he was. He respected O'Malley's power a lot and his precision. But Merab did what Merab does. I don't want to take away too much from his performance. He landed, I think, 6 takedowns. He had 10 minutes of control time. It was a very Merab-like fight, and he wasn't really in trouble except for that 5th round when he kind of got hurt, but he was in firm control of the fight. So, yeah, I'll give it a 7 out of 10 maybe, but Merab did what Merab does.
Yeah, I like that. You're right. And Bilal was walking through some fire, and he almost paid for it at the end, but that's what the fans want. You got to bridge the two. And even that one wasn't called the barn burner. Danny, let's go to you now. Your reaction to that world title victory by Merab Dvalishvili.
I expected the result, but not how it went down. I had Merab winning. I thought he was going to win a decision. More or less, I expected this fight. However, I did expect more resistance from O'Malley. I do wonder if he was injured or if he was sick entering that fight. Keep in mind, I believe it was in the 5th round. I don't know if you guys caught on to it, but his corner man, Tim, said something like, oh, it's almost over. It's almost done. Or we're almost done with this, something like that. And it just seemed like he had no energy. It just seemed like there wasn't really any urgency to make a big statement. He looked flat, as Dana White said on the presser. Like he didn't look dialed in. When Sean O'Malley's fighting, we usually get a different sense in the fight. Sort of the aura around him changes, the air around him changes. There's a certain locked in feeling that we get when we see him fight. I didn't really get that. I kind of felt like he was on autopilot, and Merab took advantage of that and won a pretty dominant decision. So not surprised with the result, but I am surprised on how we got there. I expected the fight to be a little bit more complicated for Merab.
Mike, your reaction to the title-winning victory by Merab Dvalishvili, and also to you, are we being too harsh on a guy that was just brilliant in his execution of a smart game plan?
Yeah, I don't know what you expected if you were thinking Merab Dvalishvili was going to win this fight. I think this pretty much went to a T of what you could believe he would try to go in there and do. He probably struck more than even some of us thought he would in this fight. I mean, 6 takedowns is pretty low compared to what he gets in some of these other fights. He had a chance to get to double digits and break GSP's all-time record, but he'll have to settle with 2nd place, and I think that record's probably going down in the next fight or two here. But yeah, I mean, this is what he had to do to win. There was a slim chance of him knocking out O'Malley, obviously. Submission, maybe if Sean made like a big mistake and gave up a bad position. But I think this was always kind of destined to be a decision for Merab Dvalishvili if he was going to win. So I don't know. I can't really hate on it too hard. I think more of the judgment goes on Sean O'Malley's side, actually. I mean, I don't know what his game plan in there was, what the execution was. It's like, was he just relying on basically a puncher's chance in this fight? You would think someone of his caliber, a champion, would have a deeper, more layered game plan than that, but it didn't really seem like he had too many answers there. And when the fight was clearly in a hole for him and he had to do something spectacular, like Danny said, his corner was telling him, this is almost over with, not you need to go out there and kill this guy if you want to leave tonight with your title because you're down 3-1 or 4-0 right now. So the energy just wasn't there. I don't want to take away from Merab's win by indicating there was anything wrong with Sean coming in. I think we just, quite frankly, saw him get exposed a little bit. I mean, you could see shades of this in the fight with Piotr Jan in terms of like the wrestling, and it's someone who could mix it up on him. He did fantastic against Aljamain Sterling, who was clearly a little shook by just the whole moment and what he needed to do to really get in there. He didn't have Merab's confidence with the striking and kind of mixing it up. That was Sean's biggest win, but we still didn't know. I mean, had only been a couple fights from him coming into this, like against this style of fighter, and we were going to get all the answers. And the answers were, he is not at that level with his takedown defense, with his get-ups, and his ability to still execute his striking while having that significant grappling threat still on his mind. So he's got a lot of work to do, and you just have to wonder now if this is kind of the end of Sean O'Malley's moment in the sun at a championship level, because I know he posted the video of him in the singlet wrestling backstage after the fight. I don't know if there's any amount of work he could do in this lifetime to catch up to Merab's grappling game. And you would say the same about probably Umar Nurmagomedov, who could potentially be the next champion. And then there's still several other tough fights out there. So yeah, a lot of questions about Sean O'Malley's future and whether he can ever get back to this level of being a champion.
And he was close to superstardom, and notice no one's clamoring for that immediate rematch either. Not that he had the bulk of title defenses to lay out, that argument. Danny, was this more about? So go ahead, Fada. You want to chime in?
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in on the body work that O'Malley did later on. I don't know if it's something his corner said, because I don't know if I caught that, or if it's an adjustment he decided to make on his own. But I thought that should have been his game plan earlier on, because he was obviously trying to maybe try to slow. I mean, how do you slow down Merab, right? So maybe that sounds stupid, but maybe he was trying to attack him in a different way because you don't want to get too overzealous with the striking, not to get taken down. So I thought the body work was great. It obviously paid dividends because he was able to hurt him. I just wonder why he didn't implement it earlier. And I do want to give Sean O'Malley a little bit of credit because I didn't know if his gas tank could last for 5 rounds, especially with mixing in the grappling. That was a big question mark. And obviously he showed that he has the power to carry on in the championship rounds. But again, Merab did what, if you envisioned Merab winning, that was the way you envisioned him doing it. So you can't kind of take away. I just expected a little bit more aggression, but I can't say that his performance was not a good one. He did exactly what Merab does, and he executed his game plan pretty perfectly.
There you go. All right. And Danny, I was going to ask you, was Dvalishvili really just that good, or was O'Malley off? And I hate hearing that O'Malley was overrated or anything like that. I don't like hearing that, because to go like 19-1, honestly, you got to be a pretty damn good fighter. But what were your thoughts of just Saturday night?
As I mentioned, yeah, I don't want to take anything away from Merab. Again, I had him to win the fight. I picked him to win the fight by decision, but I do feel like we didn't get a prime locked in version of Sean O'Malley in there. I think we've all seen, even in the Peter Yan, as Mike mentioned earlier, like, yeah, sure, he was taken down, but look how active he was from the bottom. How many times was he trying to get up? How much resistance he put on the takedown defense. Now, obviously, Peter Yan is not Merab Dvalishvili. Dvalishvili is much superior in that area, but I don't know. He just kind of looked off that night. He looked flat, as Dana White mentioned. So again, not to take away anything from Merab, I think a fully trained, prepared version of Sean O'Malley in there would have probably seen the same fate. However, the way the fight looked would have been much differently. He just kind of looked like he was, I don't want to say he gave up, but he just wasn't in there that night. So we'll see what the next few fights hold for him. We'll see if this is an indication of something much bigger. I hope it's maybe just a single instance, because he is, one of the biggest stars, if not the biggest active star in the UFC. So having him winning and success is obviously a good thing for the sport. But yeah, man, I would say one of the worst performances he's had in the UFC, if not the worst.
Yeah. Mike Bond, this is right down your wheelhouse. You kind of already told us Umar Nurmagomedov is probably next for Dvalishvili. Unless you got a wild card for us, tell us that and tell us what's next for O'Malley. You're muted, Mike.
Yeah, I think it's got to be Umar. He's the easy choice in my mind. I know Davidson Figueiredo's out there and people are making campaigns for him, especially Merab. But yeah, it's got to be Umar to me. He's got the undefeated record. He's got the name. He's got the style. You see a lot of people out there just saying he does everything Merab does, but he just does it better. So when someone's saying that about the champion, I feel like it's their time to get that. He's got the name. He could do something to kind of carry this division if he's able to win that belt and make it a little more star-studded. Probably the next best thing you could ask for out of a champion in terms of like the clout he brings besides Sean O'Malley. So yeah, I think they're going to do that fight. And I hate to put it this way too, but I don't think Dana White and the UFC are overly in love with Merab or him being in this position as champion. So if they feel that he wants him, they want him out of there, I think they probably think Umar is the biggest threat to do that.
Yeah, and what about for O'Malley, Mike? What would you suggest there? Tell us, from the pieces that you do on Sunday, you do an excellent job of unpacking what could be next for each fighter. Who do you like Figgy for him? If they pair up the Nurmi with Merab?
I don't hate it. I actually said the two options that I like are either Henry Cejudo, because there's lots of baggage that comes with that fight. Those two have been chirping at each other for quite a long time now.
This is true. Yeah.
Sean did the whole thing with his podcast with Usman leading up to the fight, and it's just a lot has been said there. And I think if you want to find out if Sean O'Malley can make improvements or defeat this style of wrestler, why no better choice than to show your improvements against an Olympic champion in Henry Cejudo, who might be a little bit past his expiration date in terms of his prime, but he's still got something left in the tank there in terms of his name value. And I think that's a fight you could definitely sell for the UFC, and it would have some good heat behind it. If not that, I said it's got to be Jose Aldo, whether he wins or loses against Mario Bautista at UFC 307. I think that would be a fantastic fight. O'Malley versus Aldo. That would be a sensational striking battle.
Right on. All right, Fada, I'm going to come to you here for the co-main event, but I do want to get to some comments here in the chat. Folks, if you leave a comment or a question, the better ones obviously get on the show. Big Ben says, I think the Sphere was great. The card was lackluster. Quay Stefan says, great panel. Sans goes. Oh, he's missing goes. All right. Green Bandana says, if you were parlaying Merab and Valentina, you must appreciate the main and co-main events like I did. Wow, not too many people are saying something like that, but see, money was involved. Josh Wallace says, I enjoyed the entire card. Yeah, not many knockouts, but shit, the Sphere was so freaking cool. What happened to Grasso? I don't know, but the panel's going to cover it right now. Quay Stefan says, not as cool as fish shows. I couldn't tell you, man. I didn't even catch you too. What a lame Vegas resident I am. Bernard Kaiwu or something like that says, what's up, Junkie? Goes is chiming in as well. Brian John says, Dana's going to have to wait a bit longer for that Emmy. Wow, not as impressed. All right, we'll get to more of the Sphere in a second if we have a chance. Fada, Valentina Shevchenko, one of the all-time greats in women's MMA. 7 title defenses, waited 18 months, may have even got short end of the stick in that draw last year, but she came back on a mission and she fulfilled it.
Yeah, listen, I know it wasn't the most entertaining fight. I know it might have sucked the life out of a lot of people, either in attendance or watching from home, because we had some bangers earlier on. But she's 36 years old. She lost her title. I mean, I picked Alexa. I thought the momentum was on Alexa's side. She got choked out in the first fight. Second fight was a draw. She felt like she didn't get enough credit with people thinking that she should have won. And for her to come out and make it look lopsided, show off her well-roundedness. We've known her as obviously a devastating striker, but to show off her well-roundedness, to control the fight like that, just credit to her mentality and being able to pick herself back up and become champion. I think that's the biggest thing for me. Like, maybe I'm a little more critical towards Merab in terms of the entertainment value than Valentina, even though you can argue that the Merab fight was perhaps a little more entertaining than the Valentina one. But I just want to kind of credit her for her mentality and just being able to come back. I know there was that stat of, fighters above 35 or whatnot not winning or not regaining their belt. Bilal kind of broke that, or I don't know what the exact stat is, but Valentina regaining her title, a lot of people question her motivation. She was such a dominant champion, nothing else to prove in her career, guaranteed Hall of Famer, and for her to come out and just regain her belt like that, I think she deserves a ton of credit for that. So I think for me, the most impressive part is just her mentality and her ability to bounce back and put on such a dominant performance and close the trilogy bout like that very definitively. I don't think too many people are talking about a fourth fight right now. So all credit to her. I didn't really care about how the entertainment value of her performance. I was just very impressed by everything leading into it and her ability to regain her throne.
Okay, so you're saying she closed the trilogy. They're 1-1-1, and obviously no one's clamoring for a fourth. No one's clamoring for a fourth right away. Would you like to see it down the road, or do you just want to leave it at that? And Alexa has to work her way through other ways, and possibly Valentina just dropping the belt to someone else.
I mean, I wouldn't hate a fourth fight down the line. It all depends on what happens. Now you have Manon Fiorot, who's a clear-cut number one contender. So anytime you have a clear-cut number one contender, especially that Valentina won in such definitive fashion like she did, I think that's the clear fight to make. And then in terms of Alexa, I don't know if this was going to be a next question, so I apologize if I answered it early. But maybe Alexa Rose Namajunas is out there. There are big fights for her as well. So I think, right? Yeah, I think you move on right now. Fourth fight down line, is it impossible? I mean, we said that about Holloway and Volkanovski, and maybe not impossible. So never say never.
So I've been butchering Manon's name the whole time. Say it one more time. How do you say it with a good French accent?
Manon Fiorot.
Oh my gosh, delivery. And watch when Danny gets going on some of the Latino fighters. We got to stick with this one here. Danny, what do you think, man? Shevchenko, we know what kind of might be next for her, but what's next for Grasso? What do we do with her? She looked demoralized out there. And the worst thing you can do to a champ is put them in a position where they might go 0-2 and everyone starts questioning their title reign and if they're legit or not. But how would you handle her?
Yeah, I almost have like the same critique that I did for the main event for this co-main event in the sense that both these fighters lost. I don't think going into it, it would have been insane to say like, oh, we're gonna see two champions lose their belt. I think we understood that both Merab and Shevchenko had a really good chances here of becoming champions in Shevchenko's side, regaining the title. But yeah, again, much like O'Malley, she looked flat. She looked vastly different compared to other performances. She looked defeated, as you mentioned. You could see it on her face, like in between rounds when Shevchenko would end the round on top and, the bell would ring. She would get up and she just had this really frustrated face. something that we haven't seen really before. I mean, we've seen her down before, but she comes out with this, again, with the Mexican spirit of no matter what's happening, I'm going to go out there and do my best and try to, win this fight and turn things around. She looked defeated early on into the fight. Again, she had a lot on her shoulders. She did a Ultimate Fighter series. She was, I don't know what the ranking will be now, but she was ranked pound for pound #1 fighter in terms of the female side, et cetera, et cetera. Like, there's been a lot of responsibilities dropped on her that she didn't have prior. So I don't know if maybe that was an issue as well, but I didn't think she gave us her best performance. And she's young enough to be able to turn this around and become champion again. But certainly it was a very uninspiring showing from her part. So yeah, we'll see what's next. Now they're tied. They both have one victory and share one draw. I do think a fourth fight would be nice just to kind of settle things, but not immediately. I think we got to see Grasso fight a contender and then maybe fight for the title again.
She looked tired. She looked lost. She looked shook. And there's no such thing as halfway crooks. So, yeah, man, she's got to really rebound from this horrible loss. But, Mike, let's go to the featured bout. Diego Lopez defeated Brian Ortega, who also at times looked lost, but it was a pretty entertaining fight. Hell, Lopez almost took him out in the first 30 seconds. What did you think of that one?
Yeah, I thought it was a great performance. Farah and I also discussed this on the preview show and talked a little bit about how Diego is a very fast starter and Brian is a very slow starter, and that almost equaled the end of the fight. And it pretty much was the end of the fight. I mean, Brian, all credit to him for once again showing that insane durability and heart and fighting spirit that has been a defining point of his career. But it was basically just survival mode from him from that point on after getting rocked super early on with that great combo by Diego. So, yeah, man, this guy showed up and he continues to impress and rise to the challenge and do all the things you would want for someone in his position who's trying to work his way up. So, yeah, this was a huge signature win. You can make, I guess, another side of the discussion on where Brian Ortega is really at. What's his motivation? Did he have a foot out the door in this weight class with plans to move up to lightweight? All those stuff are relevant and fair things. But, Diego went out there and punched him in the face and hurt him really bad and won the fight fair and square. So, yeah, he's in line for something big. Ilia Topuria said when I interviewed him a few weeks ago that he thought he was going to be a really strong candidate for a title shot in the near future. That's definitely coming to life. I don't know what his path is right now. We assume Ilya and Max Holloway are going to fight at UFC 308. Volkanovski will fight the winner in the early quarter of next year, and then maybe someone else gets a shot after that if there's no more rematches in play. So I think Diego, maybe he weighs in as the backup in Abu Dhabi. Dana White kind of alluded to that, but I don't think he'll be getting a title shot off that unless Volkanovski gets hurt or something like that. He's probably looking at needing one more win.
Danny, would you agree with what Mike's saying based off what the UFC's kind of hinting at? Because Diego Lopez is kind of regarded as someone that's got it, and he's been popping, and he almost finished the veteran, the two-time title challenger in Brian Ortega. Not only do we have Volk waiting on the sidelines, we also got Movsar Evloev and Aljamain Sterling who are fighting at UFC 307. I don't know if one of them will make noise because they have styles where they don't really come off, they don't fly off the sheet there when they win. But what are your thoughts on handling Lopez?
I think Lopez should fight for the belt next. I know that Volkanovski is obviously a historic figure, and in normal circumstances, a champion that dominant deserves an immediate rematch, whether it's him immediately next or his next fight is the one for the title, like we saw with Israel Adesanya recently. But I got to see Diego Lopez fight for the belt, man. This is just such an exciting fighter that's been killing it. He's been doing so much for the promotion. He's blown up in the sport, really just a huge fan favorite. And you got to strike while the iron's hot. So I do feel like this fight's got to happen, him for the belt. So I wouldn't hate him being a replacement. Sure, I want to see Ilia Topuria versus Max Holloway. That fight is amazing. But for an option B, Topuria Lopez or Holloway Lopez, that's still a banger fight. So sign me up. Look, I think Volkanovski, again, 3 losses, right? Well, 2 consecutive losses, losing to Islam Makhachev and then Topuria. Both of them got knocked out. I don't want to see him get plugged into a title fight. I know, again, the history, I know the legacy and all that, but how about you fight somebody else and then fight for the belt? But as of now, I want to see Diego Lopez fight for the belt. That's what I want to see.
Interesting. All right, but Volk's gonna come after you, Danny, for saying that one. And how about the haterade in our chat? Josh Wallace says, if Gordon Ramsay thinks it's cool, who cares what a random keyboarder thinks? I guess that's haterade towards someone else towards the top of the chat. But Azan Zaman says 4 hours for 5 fights was a tad too much. Not gonna lie. And Schul's Jubilee's gas station says 1 KO, 1 sub in a card, celebrating the Mexican spirit. Hey. Take it easy, all right? Some of the, I know we went 2 and 4, man, or something like that, but we were throwing down in some of them fights. We still haven't even gotten to Lazy Boy. And then Hubert Kulakowski says, thoughts on Marab, 0 KO attempts and 0 submission attempts. Well, it was the game plan, and that's been discussed. I'll see if I can get to some more here. Fada, give me a
one
highlight.
for one on the kiss attempts, though.
Yeah. Fada, give me a highlight, please, from the rest of the card, this historic card, aside from the ones we've discussed.
Well, before I give the highlight, I just wanted to point out, because I was like listening to Volkanovski put out his reaction video, and obviously he expects to be next, but he mentioned an interim title fight with Diego Lopez if for some reason the winner of Topuria and Max Holloway can't turn around in time. That was his stipulation. He said if they can't turn around in time, if they're out for some reason, if they decided to an immediate rematch, if Holloway wins and entertains defending his BMF title, whatever could happen, if they can't turn around in a decent amount of time, he entertained an interim title with Diego Lopez. So I just wanted to add that. In terms of the highlight, gotta go with Esteban Ribovics and Daniel Zellhuber. I mean, Daniel Zellhuber, out of all kind of the young Mexican talent that was on this card, is one of those guys that people were highlighting a lot and talking about him, having a lot of potential. And that was just an amazing fight. I don't even know how he didn't get finished there. Shout out, was it Jason Herzog? Someone correct me if I'm mistaken, but shout out to him for allowing the fight to continue and not stopping it. But he showed so much heart. But that was such an amazing fight. Fight of the year contender. I know people recency bias perhaps, but in the moment I was feeling that. So amazing fight. And just an amazing showcase of 2 young rising contenders. You always love to see that in a division so stacked like lightweight. And a lot of people are complaining about the name value on this card outside of the main and co-main event. So when you get the 2 younger guys, the 2 rising prospects giving you a fight like that, they kind of show you exactly why they were on that card and exactly why they had such a high billing on the main card. So that was an amazing fight.
For sure. All right. Mike Bond, how about you? What's your other highlight?
The gruesome cut opened up on Irene Aldana's face, man. That thing was so bad. I'm sure everyone has seen it a million times at this point, but holy hell, like that was one of the worst I've ever seen. Irene just posted something of her being stitched up, which is absolutely disgusting, what she looks like today. Like, yeah, that was one of the worst cuts I've ever seen in UFC history.
Did they get her a plastic surgeon at least? They didn't do it in the back, right?
I would hope so. I would hope they took her to their best person. I don't really know what they do in that situations. Maybe that's something to look into, exactly how they deal with something of that magnitude. Because like you said, George, for smaller cuts, they'll still stitch them up in the back and bring them over to the media room or whatever. That obviously she lost the fight, so that wasn't in play regardless. But yeah, holy hell, she is so tough. We've seen this from her multiple times. I don't think you want this to be your signature look if you're Irene Aldana, just to like go through these fights where there's such bloodbaths. But she's been on the other side of it sometimes. So I guess what goes around comes around. But yeah, that thing is real bad, and that's going to leave a scar for life. So there were some other great performances, wins. I know we're talking about someone who lost here, and credit to Norma Dumont for winning the fight, even though it was opened on a headbutt, right? Or a clash of heads. So it's not like she did a legit technique to open that cut up, but she's still a good fighter and definitely a title threat at 135. So that was an important result there too.
My best to Irina, man. I hope she heals up and stay away from Marab. He'll try and get those stitches out sooner rather than later. Danny Segura, who was your highlight?
I got to go with Lazy Boy Rodriguez. 2-0 in the UFC, opened up the UFC pay-per-view main card, and that's probably one of the best comebacks I've ever seen, at least in recent years. I thought he was done in those first few seconds. When
if O'Day walks away, Danny, he might have actually gotten his hand.
Yeah. I think in that sequence, if they would have stopped that fight, I think very few people would have complained. I mean, his hands were down. He was looking somewhere else once. Oda jumped on top of him. So I think if there was a stoppage there, people would have been like, yeah, that totally should have been stopped. Yet the referee let it continue, and it worked out for Lazy Boy, because not only did he survive that sequence, but he went on to win the second and third round which that's extremely hard to do, especially after getting tagged like that. I think this guy's going to be a superstar. I mean, he's creeping into like 1 million followers on Instagram. I know in Mexico, he's already been a very popular figure for some years. And then, this just made him even more popular. So, yeah, shouts out to Lazy Boy. Big and nice addition to the flyweight division. And in case you guys haven't checked it out, I wrote a longer feature on him pre-fight, but it still stands more or less kind of recounting his childhood and all the struggles that he's gone through and why he's connected so much with the Mexican fan base. So, yeah, just a little cheap
Tweet that out again, Danny, and we'll all retweet it, man. Great piece. And that guy owned the press conference and his walkout. Everyone was into it. I think he had got the momentum from the press conference. He had that it factor, man. And if he actually would have finished O'Day like real quick, like O'Day almost finished him, I'm telling you, man, he would have really, really popped. I like that guy. He really, really impressed me. Mine, not that anyone asked, because I'm obviously just the guy that distributes. They're the ones that are dunking at the panelists. These guys are awesome. But hey, give O'Day Osborne one more shot, because even though his back was to the wall and he's lost like 3 out of 4 or something like that, he actually went out there and fought, and he fought a good 15 minutes. And give a shot to Shirez as well. I mean, a beautiful jab. The way it's supposed to be thrown, boom, boom, straight punches. It's just that Joshua Van has a lot of heart, and he came back. But I hope they give Shirez another shot, because I think he's also lost 203. So I know it's weird, but those were my highlights. The 2 guys impressed, even though they lost. But guys, we got to move on. Let me give a couple quick comments here. Joseph Costello says, how long is their contract with MGM? We're really not sure, but if Dana's taking a look, you never know, right? MMA Events Vlog says Sphere presentation was awesome, was priced out of attending, but great on TV. And yes, that's something they should pay attention to. Clay Stefan Ribovich and so Hubert was on fire. Brian John says the prelims were great. Azan says MGM, T-Mobile are not from the same contract, right? No, they're not. MGM allowed Dana to do the Sphere because of some negotiations, some stuff that's been going on behind the scenes, where Dana has stated that it hasn't been pleasant working for MGM, but they are under contract, and they go back to that. All right, guys, some big announcements were recently made regarding the UFC's annual trip to the Big Apple. UFC 309's main event is official. John Jones will be defending his undisputed heavyweight title versus Stipe Miocic. And in the 5-round non-title co-main event rematch, we have Charles Oliveira versus Michael Chandler. React. Let's go to Farah Hanoun. What did you think of this announcement? Clears up a lot of things.
I mean, obviously the main event comes as absolutely no surprise. It's all what we were all expecting. We were hearing November. We were hearing MSG. I'm sure there's nobody happier than Tom Aspinall that this finally has a date. So I think it's more like everybody's happy that it finally has a date. In terms of the co-main event, I think a little bit of a surprise, because I do believe Dan Hooker, after his last fight, his win over Mateus Gamrot, he was kind of hinting that the UFC were looking at him and Charles Oliveira. So I was a little bit surprised to see that Chandler is matched up with Oliveira. Am I entirely surprised that he moved on? I mean, I'm surprised that it took him that long to move on, but obviously I think that's a topic we're going to cover later on. Yeah, so a little bit of a curveball in terms of this rematch. I wonder what Charles Oliveira has to gain. He did win the first fight. Amazing fight, by the way. Obviously, Chandler was able to drop him early, and then he ended up getting finished. Well, it's a typical Charles Oliveira fight, right? But a little bit surprised in terms of Charles Oliveira, because he did come off a close loss to Arman Sarukian, so he almost got the title shot. Now he has to fight Michael Chandler. Not too much to gain for him. If you're Michael Chandler, this obviously seems like a little bit of a reward from the UFC, because the McGregor fight didn't happen. Although he did mention that if he beats Charles Oliveira, that, you know, it puts him in the title picture, but he could also still get the McGregor fight. So obviously it's, I guess, as good as a reward as you can get for Michael Chandler if you're not going to fight Conor McGregor. Charles Oliveira, on the other hand, I'm a little bit surprised at this fight for him in particular. I love Charles Oliveira, watch him fight anybody, but I just wonder that there's quite a bit of like things to lose for him if he loses to a Michael Chandler, a guy you already beat. And I know Michael Chandler has built up a really good name for himself, but it's his last win over Tony Ferguson, I believe. So if you're Charles Oliveira, it's a bit of a risky fight. If you're Michael Chandler, I guess it seems like one of the better rewards you can get in terms of a second-ranked former champion Charles Oliveira, a chance at redemption, and at the same time, well, we'll see what comes out of it. But I believe if he can still get that McGregor fight, he'll still get it. He'll still go for it. But as for now, so that was a little bit of a curveball. Jones-Miocic is what we expected.
Yeah, and Mike, we've been speculating and going all over all these rumors for the last 6 months. Now it's finally here. What's your excitement level in all this?
Pretty mid to low, I guess I would say, just because we've talked about this for over a year on the show, about how I don't like this fight and how I don't feel it makes a ton of sense, but we don't need to rehash all that. You can go watch like 20 past episodes where we've had this same conversation. I guess to be positive here, I'm glad it's booked. We have a date. It's not that far away, just a couple months. So let's get this over with so we can restart a real heavyweight division. I mean, how am I supposed to get excited for this when Dana White does interviews over the weekend with Complex saying this is pretty much 100% Stipe Miocic's retirement fight, and then a video just comes out this morning of John Jones speaking to someone Saturday at UFC 306 saying that this is more than likely his retirement fight. So I guess my biggest hope is whoever wins, if they both do retire, that John Jones, assuming it's him, actually does hand Tom Aspinall the heavyweight title on his way out of the cage, because that's going to be as close as we get to seeing that. And we can have Tom Aspinall as our real champion and move forward with this division, because this whole thing is being pretty ridiculous.
Danny, if that scenario plays out, who do you think hands that belt to Tom Aspinall? Sneaky way of saying who do you think wins?
Dana White.
John Jones, obviously. Stipe Miocic. I saw a stat on Twitter not so long ago that Miocic currently doesn't hold a single win over an active UFC heavyweight, meaning all his wins are expired pretty much. All of them are out of the UFC or retired. Yeah, this fight kind of just feels like it's holding hostage the heavyweight division. As Mike mentioned, you hear that Miocic is going to walk away, and then you hear that most likely Jones will be doing the same. So it's like, what are we doing here? What does this fight mean? And meanwhile, you have somebody like Tom Aspinall on the sidelines with an interim title and a defense as well. I just want to get this over with. I'm glad it was booked just so we finally kind of can look forward to being done with this, but not too excited for the fight, to be honest. And yeah, I mean, what is the real meaning of this fight at this point? Especially both guys aren't going to stick around. Let's just get this over with. I just hope that November comes around quick, and that's it.
And
the only outcome that would be hilarious here is if Stipe Miocic wins, because then we're getting a rematch and then maybe a trilogy fight, and Tom Aspinall might as well go fight in PFL or something, because he's not seeing a
watch there be a draw or something.
Yeah.
Watch Miocic win, and Dana still argue that John Jones is pound for pound the number one.
Then he's going to argue that Miocic is pound for pound.
Seeing that B-roll, and by the way, the only show on the internet that'll show you that kind of B-roll. Shout out to Ken Hathaway, shout out to Kamikaze, from this past weekend's fights or all the other fights that have taken place. Just seeing Francis Ngannou and saying, wow, he was under the UFC banner recently. Tom Aspinall's just sitting there like we could have some real special fights, and yet we're kind of stuck with this one, and none of us are happy about it. And we're all OGs here. We're trying to see the bright side and all of it, and we're just happy that it's booked so it can be done and over with and we can move on. And that's a damn sad thing. Spada, you look like you want to chime in?
Yeah, I was going to say, it's funny because Jones hasn't fought in years. We saw him a little bit against Gane, but we didn't see that much of John Jones. So I still have a lot of question marks of how John Jones is going to look. So unless he runs through Stipe Miocic, I'm actually quite intrigued to see more of John Jones. But I think if we get anything of a competitive fight, we're just going to get the I told you so from Dana White, like why Miocic and Jones should have happened. So I'm just intrigued to see how John Jones looks. We haven't really seen him fight too much. I mean, in the 1 minute or so against Gane, it's not, I mean, he did run through him, but I was just interested to see more of the striking, more of the speed and everything. So I just hope this fight stretches out a little bit, because I'm just intrigued. There are question marks surrounding both really on their form.
Yeah. Mike, we already heard Fada's take. She likes, for Chandler's sake, the Oliveira booking, because it may even get him close to a title shot should he win. Did you like that matchup for Michael Chandler? I guess his plan B, since he didn't get McGregor.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, he was, I think, the favorite at one point against Conor McGregor, and he opened as the pretty sizable underdog against Charles Oliveira. So in terms of like him getting a win, I felt much more confident in him versus McGregor at this stage than him versus Oliveira. So that's a little bit scary. But if he loses this fight, I don't think it necessarily gets him out of the running for McGregor. If he comes back, that's a whole other thing. But let's say he does, I don't think him being on 2 losses is any worse than being on 3 losses, whatever. It's going to be the same thing. Conor fought Cerrone off of 3 losses. So that would not surprise me one bit, even if he loses badly. But yeah, I mean, the upside here, division-wise, is pretty good. He makes fair points for the most part in what he's saying. Islam's going to fight Arman, and then it's a little bit wide open in terms of who could step in there with a statement performance. I think it's possible for him to get that title shot. And I do think his name value through this whole process, as agonizing as being with Conor McGregor, people know who Michael Chandler is a lot more than they did 2 years ago, even though he hasn't fought a single time in that stretch. So I think he is a pretty big name in the sport, relatively speaking, co-headlining Madison Square Garden under Jon Jones. Besides headlining a pay-per-view with Conor McGregor, I don't think you could really ask for a better fight card positioning there. I hope they're taking care of him with pay-per-view buys or something else coming out of this card to at least make up some of the things he lost from the McGregor fight. But from like a skill progression point, yeah, having a win over Conor McGregor in your cap, there's nothing that compares to that. But he said his goal from day one was to be the UFC lightweight champion. And if that is first and foremost, this is the fight you take, this is the fight you do. And if you win, it opens up a whole world for you.
Yeah, well, let's take a look at 309 as Danny tells us who he thinks is going to win the Oliveira Chandler matchup. Who do you like, Danny Segura?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Oliveira here. I think Chandler, keep in mind, he lost 2 years of already a very limited prime. When he entered the UFC, he was already quite up there in age, and he's really been out of action for almost 2 years. Now he's 38 years old. Not only is he inactive, but the age factor. And then Oliveira, we saw him against Saruki, and yeah, he lost, but he's still game. He's still a very dangerous fighter. So, and he's already proven to be able to have a style that's effective against Chandler, obviously beating him in the past. So I think anybody can win here, obviously. But if you thought the first fight was even and you were slightly favoring Oliveira, you got to favor Oliveira much more now at this point. So I'm going with Oliveira, but I guess with Chandler, you never know. He does pack power, and there's always that factor that he can finish the fight at any time.
Did that card jump off for you guys? Do you like it so far? What you're seeing? I mean, some pretty big names, but again, not to crap on the heavyweight fight. Entertainment value, $80. All this weight. Bo Nickel is getting a tougher test, obviously, now with Paul Craig. Natalia Silva versus Vivian Araújo.
That's incorrect too, George. Just to jump in, it's actually Karine Silva versus Araújo, and Anthony Smith versus Dominic Reyes is on UFC 210 in December, not this card. So they were focused so much on the production of the Sphere, they messed up the fight card graphics on this thing.
Chris Weidman's legit though, right?
Yes,
he's a New Yorker. All
That's
right,
got to be his retirement fight.
You guys like it?
How many retirements are we getting at UFC
sideways?
309? Could be minimum 3.
There's probably going to be a line for that. There could be 3 or 4. Yeah.
Does that card need more pop, or are you guys happy with it as it is, or what are you feeling?
It's all right. I mean, that's the thing. This is what you're going to get out of cards like this, headlined by Jon Jones and Conor McGregor. They had an exception last year when they went into New York with the 2 title fights, but that's because it was the Pereira fight, I believe, is the co-main event, and no one was champion, so they didn't have to pay pay-per-view points out to a co-main event because no one was a sitting champion. So on Jon Jones and Conor McGregor cards, you're very unlikely to see a second title fight unless it's a vacant, an interim, or maybe a women's fight too, where they might not have pay-per-view points in their contract.
Joseph Boza says somebody, or maybe Dana finally got it in Chandler's ear. Chandler looks like a fool for holding out for 2 years for a fight. That ain't happening. Conor called Chandler a chicken for not waiting. Yeah, Conor kind of has a lot of nerve, honestly, for that one, acting all surprised. We'll get to that in just a second. Forrest Daniel says, this panel is elite in MMA coverage. Question for the panel, will McGregor ever fight again? And with who, or now that Chandler is fighting Oliveira? You guys let that marinate, because we're going to get to that in just a second. I just want to tell you that the most popular MMA fighter of all time has not fought since January 2021. The UFC saying Conor McGregor won't even fight till 2025. So that would be 4 years at the earliest. So what is going on, playing off of the question in the chat and one that I had for you guys? Let's start off with Mike on this one. What's going on with the notorious one?
A lot. Too much to talk about in the next 10 to 15 minutes here. I mean, it's all the same stuff we've seen for the past few years, right? I mean, Michael Chandler said it himself in his first statement. He's like, let us know when you can go a few days sober and get a real training camp going. I think that's been a concern around Conor McGregor and the people around him for quite a while. I think if he could just walk into the cage and fight without all the bells and whistles, he would do it many, many times over the past few years. But when he fights, it needs to be a whole event. It needs to be insane amount of money behind it, the proper push, make all these partners happy, all these different things. So it makes it a very difficult challenge. And the UFC is probably very trepidatious as it is with him, given what they just did in July, and he pulls out a couple weeks from the fight. I think a lot of their concerns that they maybe had about a comeback around Conor were validated in that moment, even though he did suffer, an injury that you can make your own assertions about whether he should have fought or could have fought with that toe. But that is one layer to it. I think the second layer is, of course, his contract, which he alluded to when he spoke at BKFC at the press conference. He said, I have 2 fights left, and essentially said they're kind of trying to slow play me. And there could be various reasons by that. Maybe there's a contract extension on the table right now. The UFC's TV rights are coming up soon. It'd be very nice to tell an ESPN and Amazon, Apple, whoever could be in these negotiations, that we have at minimum 2 Conor McGregor fights locked in the books right now. So there's many, many things going on here. I don't know which one overbears the other. Obviously, they did try to book him in July, so it's not impossible to get a deal done, but yeah, you're hearing 2 kind of vastly different stories on the 2 sides. Conor seems frustrated and annoyed, but also trying to preach patience. And the UFC, seems to think that he'll be ready to fight early next year. And maybe that's a business decision to have him on the Q1 books. So I can't give you a 1,000,000% answer, but if you can put the pieces together and look at all the moving parts, I think the picture becomes more clear.
And before we get to Danny Segura and Fada Hanoun, we actually have a clip of Conor McGregor addressing this. So let's go to that.
You are at in your career right now?
I got tested this evening. I got tested today by the Drug-Free Sport Agency. I'm the most tested athlete on the roster by more than twice the amount. I believe I'm tested maybe 13 times. The amount of seconds it took me to finish Jose Aldo, 13 times. And, actually, funny enough, Jose Aldo was number 2 in the testing. I think he's been tested 6 times. So I've been tested more than twice all these other athletes, yet I struggle to get a date. So, I've talked to Sheikh Turkey and said, Sheikh Turkey, can you assist me here? As far as Chandler rematching Oliveira, I'm happy with the date. It's November. Maybe we can still do it after, if they're not going to line me out till maybe December, January, February, or one of these dates. Maybe we can still do it. I'm just a bit, out of the loop with it, So all I can do is carry on doing what I'm doing. I test under the testing administration. I train daily, and that's it. Let's see what happens. Hopefully, it all comes to fruition.
That's not how you pronounce His Excellency's name, by the way. John Anik does it perfectly, and I'd probably butcher it too, but it certainly isn't Sheikh Turkey. Anyway, Dana says the same thing. Danny, what's going on through your lenses? You've heard Mike Bond. He brings it, man. He's got some info. Kind of heard a little bit of what Conor says. Is Conor being iced, or is it on him?
I think he's being iced. A lot of people point out at these videos that surface on random Instagram accounts about some unusual behavior, perhaps on camera from McGregor. And sure, I'm sure he's doing his fair bit of partying. I mean, the footage is out there. But this is also a guy that admitted to not really have a training camp for the biggest fight of his career against Khabib Nurmagomedov. And at the press conference, he was drinking his whiskey. This is a guy that will fight anybody, anywhere. Obviously, he did get injured for his last fight, so maybe that statement doesn't fully stand. But still, this is a guy that no matter what condition he's in, he'll show up to the fight, even if he's not 100%. So a lot of people that point to the partying and whatever, I don't think that's ideal for fighting, but is that something that's going to stop McGregor from fighting? I don't think so. I'm more aligned with the idea that, he only has 2 fights left on his contract. He has shown interest in fighting for the promotion that he's part owner in now, Bare Knuckle Fighting. And you know, you don't want to lose a star and a draw that big to another promotion and then have rival dates down the line. So, and again, the UFC's deal's coming up, the ESPN deal, and whoever they sign with, I'm sure they're going to want to have McGregor, you know, a few McGregor fights, because obviously that's big business. So I think it's more on that end. But sure, McGregor obviously does have a bit to blame. At one point, he did have a date, right? And a lot of fighters fight injured. I'm not saying it's advisable, but if you really wanted to fight, you could. So yeah, I think he's mostly being iced, but there's a little bit of blame on both sides, I think.
Alex Pereira's fought with broken toes. That's all
Yeah.
I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
Fada, what are your thoughts? Is he being iced by the UFC, or is it on him, the partying and just not getting a camp together and maybe not even being motivated because he's got so much money?
I don't know. I think it's a bit of both. It's Turkish Sheikh, by the way, so I don't think anyone's going to pronounce that correctly anytime soon. But I'm going to read Joseph Boza's. I'm going to read Joseph Boza's comment here. He said, "Dana saving Conor for that negotiation window. Their TV deal has to be negotiated in the first quarter of 25. If you have Conor, you look good." I think that's the general idea that people have. He did have a date, though. We have to obviously mention that UFC 303. He was forced out. He said, I want to come back at 100%. I agree with that as well. Conor's been notorious, no pun intended, for fighting injured. He's done it multiple times in his career. So he just wanted to come back at a full bill of health. I think he knows what's at stake with the loss, especially that he seems to hold on to the past a lot, as we saw in the video talking about the 13 second of Jose Aldo. Was a very long time ago, but Conor does a good job of constantly reminding us of his achievements, which are obviously very great. But yeah, I think at this point, because he didn't make it to 303, it's got to be something related to the new TV deal going into 2025. They have other options in terms of November. Obviously, we finally saw Jones and Miocic official for the December pay-per-view. They've got options. They've got champions that could headline those cards. So why not push McGregor to 2025? So I think it probably has to do with that. But completely icing him out, he was booked at UFC 303, so I can't say it's entirely that, but maybe something that they thought of after McGregor withdrew. So I'm sure it's part to do with it for sure.
I think it's all on McGregor. For a while there, I just thought the leg didn't heal, like it didn't heal or whatever, but he took forever to get back into the testing pool, and then he got back in, and then the toe, whatever. That's an injury. It happens to all fighters. But all the other hiccups, I think, have just been on him. He doesn't have his life together. It doesn't appear like that to me.
I know, but then we hear, sorry to interrupt you, but we hear like John Kavanagh say, McGregor's ready to go. Like it's just, I don't know. But one thing I've noticed is that UFC, Conor, like no one's really crapping on the other. We've seen Dana White kind of sometimes get a little bit aggressive with certain fighters when they're not fighting and they're not kind of doing what the promotion's plans are. It does, there is frustration from both sides, but it seems quite respectful. The business relationship has always kind of been good between Conor and Dana, and they've always kind of publicized that. So that's one thing I've noticed, that they haven't reached a stage where they're kind of like crapping on each other. So I think they'll work it out.
Yeah. Well, I hope so. So you think he will fight again, is what you're saying, at some point?
I think so.
Mike, will he ever fight again?
Yes. Not this year, obviously, but yeah, I think he will fight in some form. Yeah.
Danny?
Yeah, I think he fights again.
I hope he fights again, but I don't know if he'll ever fight again. And I think this is all on him. You guys make great valid points. I can see this being part of possible negotiations that are coming up for them, whether they re-sign with ESPN or go in another direction. Of course, it would be very appealing to whoever steps forward and works with the UFC going forward to have a couple Conor McGregor fights, but he could lose the next one and honestly look horrible in it and not even fight that second one. So I just don't know.
I mean, there's
much that or him, man.
That part is interesting too, right? Because it's like he has the 2 fights, and yeah, they'd be part of this negotiations. Like that starts, as was noted in the comments, at Q1 of next year, but that TV deal wouldn't start until 2026. So are you holding him out? Give him 1 fight in the first quarter next year, and then are you going to hold him out a whole nother year until that new TV deal starts and say, okay, we have McGregor for 1 fight if he doesn't re-sign? So like, how valuable is that really? And maybe he's super disgruntled or whatever, right? So I don't know, like how long can you really hold him out with this part of it, given the timing and all that stuff? So I don't maybe buy into that, talking myself out of it a little bit, but Yeah, I mean, he definitely self-imposed some of this, as you said, George, him waiting as long as he did to get back in the drug testing pool. He notes multiple times there, about the testing. So obviously, I think we all know at this point, when he was recovering, when he was filming Roadhouse, he was probably not perfectly clean or whatever there, but it seems like all that stuff, any traces or picograms or whatever you want to call it, is out of his system now, and he's testing routinely clean. That was a concern at one point, that, he might get flagged for something remaining in his system. So yeah, like he definitely dragged this out longer than he needed to in terms of like getting the ball running or putting things in motion. And I think we're seeing the fallout of part of that as working its way into the storyline right now.
And I think the reason Dana doesn't crap on him anymore is because he's his all-time most successful fighter. And the nosedive this guy is doing on the personal level and on the career level, he probably doesn't want to crap on that guy, but he looks frustrated, and I think that's why he holds back. And I know we're here at the end, but here's a good question. If he does come back, I'm going to go to Mike for this one, because, Mike, you followed Poirier pretty closely. Do you think it would be McGregor and Poirier for a fourth? Because Poirier's looking for his last one. He said he rose his hand when Gaethje said, I'm looking at 4 athletes, and Poirier was one of them. But could it be that one? Because at this point, Poirier's kind of phased out of title contention. Chandler has a fight booking. Gaethje wants to get into title contention, and I don't know if it goes through Poirier. Maybe it does, because I sometimes all trilogies don't have to be settled, or all rivalries don't have to be settled, because it would be a trilogy. They're 1-1. I could see them retiring as that way. What are your thoughts?
I think it's possible that matchup would be in play. I think is something you could discuss. I'm sure Dustin would love to get that call for his final fight, get one final gigantic bag before you dip out of the sport. And I'm sure he feels very confident at this point. He could whoop Conor pretty good. So I think he would gladly sign the contract, even if it would be a messy buildup and all that kind of stuff. This is very different from the personal side than like Colby Covington. I think he's happy to do business with Conor McGregor as opposed to Colby. So I think he would certainly take that. Does the UFC want it? I don't know. I do think if Conor comes back and the timing works with Michael Chandler, I think they're still going to try to revisit that. But, if Chandler loses to Oliveira, he, breaks an arm, breaks a leg, like anything, that could keep him out for 6-8 months, where if they're trying to get Conor to fight in Q1, it doesn't line up. The options are certainly open, and Dustin Poirier would be on the short list.
All right, guys. Excellent job today. Excellent job to the whole Junkie team covering the historic UFC 306 card. Please like the video. You hear that all the time from anytime you watch YouTube content, but it's super important. And when I said it really nice at the watch along the other day, a lot of likes came through. So hopefully it works. Just the casual approach. Like the video on the way out. Hit the subscribe button. That's all we ask from you, and we'll handle the rest. Amazing content all over the channel. And a big thanks to Farah Hanoun, our international superstar reporter, checking in from overseas. Danny Segura, the host of Hablemos MMA, and of course the MMA media titan himself, Mike Bond. Kamikaze on the back end. He almost did his own little sphere. That was some awesome graphic that he did. He does it weekly for our thumbnails here on the Spinning Back Clique show. So kudos to him. And Ken Hathaway, he's working. That's why we're going an hour late for these next few weeks, because of the Dana White Contender Series. He's handling that. He handled the Sphere, so we never forget about cold coffee. And we're out of here. See you next week for Spinning Back Clique. Until then, go out and be a champion.